The throne chamber of the Relari Empire shimmered with violet light, refracted through crystalline towers and ceremonial torches. It was a place of tradition and power, where silence was sacred and every word carried the weight of history. Queen Solari sat upon the obsidian throne, her silver-scaled skin catching the firelight, her gaze fixed on the strange creature before her. A human commander, Elias Drake, stood straight, despite the alien gazes drilling into him from all sides. He wore no ornate armor or gilded robes, just the black and gray uniform of Earth's interstellar diplomacy corps. Scars lined his face like battle medallions, and where most diplomats used polished words, Elias preferred blunt honesty. It made him a curiosity. And in the Relari court, that was both dangerous and oddly effective. Earth was new to the galactic stage, and the Relarian Empire, over 10,000 years old, were not known for quick friendships. Their society was bound by rigid genetic and political codes. Interbreeding among castes was taboo, and relations outside their species were nearly unthinkable. To even speak casually with a non-Relari was viewed as indulgent at best, scandalous at worst. Yet here stood Elias, not only speaking to Queen Solari, but challenging her openly in front of her court. "This treaty isn't balanced," he said, pointing to the holographic display of resource allocations. "You're giving Earth mining rights to systems that have already been stripped bare. That's not cooperation. That's a cleanup job." Gasps rippled through the Relari nobles. Even the guards tensed, but Solari didn't move. Her lavender eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with interest. "No one speaks to me like that," she said slowly. Elias shrugged. "Maybe that's the problem." And then impossibly she smiled. Over the next few months that strange rapport deepened. Elias remained stationed in Relath Prime, attending diplomatic sessions and joint councils. At first he was merely tolerated, then consulted. Eventually he became essential. Earth's pragmatic insight, combined with Elias's unfiltered nature, made him invaluable. But it wasn't just politics. Between him and Solari, something wordless brewed. Late-night meetings extended beyond official hours. Debates turned personal, philosophical. Solari, used to obedience and protocol, found herself disarmed by Elias's defiance. His humor, crude, unpredictable, struck her like lightning in a dry sky. He questioned everything. He laughed where others bowed. And slowly, carefully, she began to unravel. Their shared moments grew more intimate. A quiet dinner atop the Citadel's spire. A visit to the ancient memory gardens, where the queen allowed Elias to touch the sacred silites, something no outsider had ever done. The gesture caused waves in her court, but she silenced all dissent. Relari biologists assured her human Relari reproduction was biologically impossible. Different base amino acids, conflicting neural chemistry. Their bodies could never bond on that level. So when Elias, driven by something between affection and awe, took her hand one starless night, neither of them thought it could mean anything more than a forbidden connection. They vanished from public view for 3 days. No official explanation was given, and no one dared ask. When they returned, Elias had a faint bruise on his collarbone, and Solari walked with the quiet, serene air of someone who had glimpsed something rare and liked it. Diplomatic relations continued. The Treaty of Unity neared finalization. Earth and Relari were closer than ever, both militarily and politically. And yet, whispers stirred in the halls. The queen's temperament had changed. Her meditations were deeper. Her expressions lingered longer on nothing at all. Something beneath the surface shifted. As for Elias, he returned to Earth briefly, unaware of what had begun to form thousands of light years away inside the queen's body. Biological impossibility now stirring with life. In the highest tower of the Relari Palace, Queen Solari stood alone one night, her hand resting just below her ribcage. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes were not. They burned with fear and hope, because deep within her, something that should not exist had taken root. And in that silent, impossible moment, the fate of the galaxy quietly began to change. It began subtly, an unfamiliar ache in Queen Solari's joints, a strange warmth pulsing through her veins, and a hollow sensation beneath her breastbone, as if her body were no longer hers. At first, she dismissed it as the strain of diplomacy. Earth's arrival into galactic politics had brought unexpected intensity to her normally calculated days. Negotiating with humans, especially Elias Drake, was a storm of unpredictability. But as the weeks passed, the symptoms became harder. To ignore her appetite shifted. She craved nutrient compounds she'd loathed since childhood. Her heightened senses, long considered her advantage in court debates, became unreliable, overwhelmed by once ignorable scents and vibrations. Worst of all, her emotions grew erratic. The Queen of Rilari, known for her glacial composure, found herself trembling with anger one moment, then laughing aloud at something trivial the next. The royal court noticed the changes. Advisors exchanged glances during sessions. Courtiers whispered behind ceremonial masks. Some believed she had been poisoned. Others suspected a psychic parasite had slipped through the palace defenses. But no one dared confront her, not until her chief medical advisor, Master Heavenar, quietly submitted a formal request for a complete bioscan. Unwilling to show weakness before her court, Solari agreed on one condition: the test would be conducted in secret, far from the public eye. Deep beneath the palace, in the sterile silence of the royal biodiagnostics chamber, she lay upon the examination bed. Crystal scanners passed over her body in humming arcs, uploading trillions of data points into the medical mainframe. She waited, watching Heavenar's expression shift from professional calm to disbelief. "Speak," she commanded. Heavenar hesitated, which was rare enough to raise her heartbeat. "My queen, the results are verified by triple-layer genomic analysis. There is life developing within your womb." The words struck her like a seismic charge. She sat upright, expression unreadable. "You are saying I am pregnant?" Heavenar's gills flushed pale violet, a sign of nervousness. "Yes, but there is more. The DNA structure is not fully Rilari. It contains foreign sequences, human sequences." Silence fell like a hammer. Solari's breath caught. It was impossible. Every Rilari biologist knew that their genetic matrix could not bind with human DNA. Centuries of research had confirmed it, and yet a memory flickered to the surface. Elias, shirtless and laughing beneath starlight, his hand resting lightly against hers. That night, the night she had discarded caution and surrendered to something ancient and instinctual. She remembered the fire that had passed between them. It hadn't felt destructive. It had felt transformative. "This is verified?" she asked quietly. Heavenar nodded. "There is no mistake. You are carrying a hybrid child, human and Rilari." She closed her eyes. Her entire empire would see this as scandal, an anomaly, a potential threat. Not only had she defied centuries of tradition, she had done something thought biologically forbidden. "I will tell no one," Heavenar added gently. "This chamber is sealed. Only you and I know." But Solari did not respond. Her hand had drifted to her stomach, where the subtle hum of new life stirred beneath her skin. It felt warm, alive, and utterly alien. "I cannot hide this," she said after a long silence. "My queen, it is not yet visible. You have time. You could—" "No," she said, her voice sharper now. "I will not bury what has already begun." Heavenar hesitated. "The child will be watched, feared, perhaps even hunted. Solari stood slowly, her eyes burning not with shame but fierce resolve. Then let them watch. Let them tremble. This is no abomination. This is proof. Proof of what? Her expression softened for the first time in hours, that we are not as separate as we pretend to be. She left the chamber without another word. Her steps were slow but certain. That evening she canceled all public appearances. Her advisors were told she was in silent meditation, but in truth she sat in her private chambers, scrolling through archived communications, pausing on the last one sent by Elias Drake before his departure. He had promised to return. Not for politics, not for power, for her dot, and now she had reason to summon him again, not as an ambassador, not as a negotiator, but as something far more terrifying in Rilari tradition, a father, outside. The twin moons of Relith rose over the fag, changing the fat, and the vaten vimlands of Relith, Relith rose over the fata palace spires. The queen stood at her window, one hand pressed lightly against her abdomen. For the first time in her long life, Queen Solari was no longer alone, and her body, once the most sacred, controlled force in her empire, had become a vessel of something unprecedented, a child born of two worlds. Earth's interstellar embassy in Geneva was a marvel of diplomacy and architecture, gleaming towers of glass and steel, surrounded by biodomes and artificial gravity fields meant to welcome delegates of every species. But on this particular morning, none of that grandeur mattered to Elias Drake. He was pacing in his quarters, coffee untouched, staring at the message pad in his hands. A Rilari envoy ship had requested immediate, private landing clearance, unusual enough to raise suspicion. More unusual still, the ship carried no diplomatic crew, no guards, and no communication about the purpose of the visit. Just a single royal authorization code. Queen Solari's. Elias hadn't seen her in nearly 3 months. Since the day he'd left Rilith, diplomatic treaty signed and sealed, he'd returned to Earth unsure what had truly happened between them. They had grown close, yes, closer than either culture allowed. But love? Romance? He wasn't naive enough to think it had meant the same to her as it did to him. So when her ship touched down outside the embassy's restricted zone and the hatch opened to reveal her alone, Elias felt a knot in his chest twist into something heavier. She stepped out in a dark cloak, her silver skin gleaming under Earth's sun. Her long hair was braided tight, adorned with only a single ceremonial ring, her least formal attire. It wasn't diplomacy. It wasn't war. It was personal. They met in the atrium of the embassy. No guards, no aides. Just the two of them, standing, apart like figures in an ancient tragedy. Solari, he breathed. Elias, she said, her voice softer than he remembered. You came all this way, he said carefully. Alone? I could not send a message, she replied. This needed to be said face to face. She stepped forward and, without a word, took his hand. He flinched at first. Rilari rarely touched outside formal ritual, but she guided his hand gently downward, resting it against her abdomen. He felt nothing at first. Just warmth, then a subtle shift, a faint thrum, a heartbeat. No two, tiny, fluttering rhythms pulsing with impossible life. Elias blinked. What is that? He asked, voice hushed. You know what it is, she said. You can feel it. He pulled his hand back as if burned. That's Solari, that's not possible. It wasn't, she said. And yet, it happened. Elias staggered a step backward. But your species, our DNA, it's not compatible. I've read every file. I saw the science. So did I. My own medics confirmed it. But the tests are clear. There is a child growing inside me. A hybrid. Elias ran both hands through his hair. So this is real. You're really pregnant with my child." "Yes," she said. "Your genetic markers are present, strong. The fetus has neural activity beyond expectation. It is viable." He let out a slow breath. The world seemed to shrink around him. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Elias finally looked at her. "Are you okay with this?" Selari didn't answer immediately. She looked around the atrium, at the earth-designed walls, at the filtered sunlight shining in through curved windows. Her gaze was distant but calm. "I am not ashamed," she said at last. "Nor afraid. This child is proof of what even our most rigid minds have denied, that life does not ask permission to evolve. That connection is not bound by our laws or our fears." Elias chuckled, though it sounded more like a nervous exhale. "I was expecting maybe a message saying hello, not galactic parenthood." "You would abandon it?" she asked suddenly. "What?" "No, never," he said, face tightening. This is big, Selari, like galaxy-altering big." "I know," she said quietly. They stood in silence again, but this time it was a shared one. Elias walked slowly to her, standing just inches away. "What now?" he asked. She lifted her eyes to his. "Now, we choose what future this child will have, one of exile or one of unity." Elias looked at her. "You came here because you want me to be part of its life. I came here because you are already part of it, whether you choose to accept it or not." He nodded slowly. "Then I choose to stay." Something passed between them, then acknowledgement, resolve, maybe even love. And as the Relari Queen and Terran commander stood together in that sunlit chamber, the first true union of their species no longer felt impossible, it felt inevitable. The official broadcast from the Relari Empire was transmitted in over 1,000 languages and across 5 major hyperwave frequencies. Every corner of the known galaxy, from the trade hubs of Zarnathi to the academic centers of Centauri Prime, received the same message, brief, unwavering, and world-shattering. Queen Selari, ruler of the Relari Empire, stood in full ceremonial regalia before the High Council. Her voice rang out, calm and unshaken. "I carry a child. It was conceived with a Terran. Its life is confirmed, and its growth stable. The father is Commander Elias Drake of Earth." She paused. "The child is not an accident. It is not an abomination. It is a sign of what we may become." The galaxy erupted. Within hours, news cycles across thousands of species exploded in chaos. On Earth, the footage played on a loop, analysts and scientists arguing over how it was biologically possible. On Relith, nobility shrieked scandal. Geneticists denounced it as an evolutionary impossibility, and spiritual leaders called it heresy. The first interspecies pregnancy between Relari and humans defied centuries of medical dogma. The fact that it had occurred between the Queen herself and a Terran military officer only deepened the impact. But behind closed doors, the real panic began. In the boardrooms of interstellar alliances, in the chambers of galactic councils, the implications were dissected. If human DNA could bond with Relari, what else could it bond with? Could other species also hybridize with humans? Was this a unique mutation, or the start of a biological revolution? No species had ever bridged the GENET divide like this, not naturally. It raised dangerous questions. What if Terran adaptability wasn't just cultural or technological, but biological? Could humans become the universal link between species? Could they one day outbreed, outlast, or even inherit the stars? On Earth, reactions were split down ideological lines. To some, Elias Drake became a hero, a symbol of humanity's place among the stars. The first father of unity, headlines read. Interviews were requested. Statues were sketched. Schools added a new chapter to their interstellar biology textbooks, but to others, it was terrifying. Was this the beginning of some uncontrolled genetic mixing? Would future generations even be fully human? Would humanity lose itself in the very diversity it sought to embrace? Some anti-Xeno groups staged protests, accusing Drake of violating human sanctity. Conspiracy theorists labeled the Queen's pregnancy a Relari plot to weaken Earth. The internet exploded with memes, fear-mongering, and unsurprisingly awkward fan fiction. And through it all, Elias kept his head down. He declined interviews, refused calls, blocked communications from every major news outlet and military agency. He stayed in Geneva, protected by diplomatic immunity and stunned by the sheer scale of what he'd helped create. But his silence was short-lived. 10 days after the Queen's announcement, a galactic summit was called in neutral territory. The orbital station Alvarius Prime. Elias was summoned as Earth's representative. He expected hostility. He expected protests. He did not expect Selari to be there, waiting for him on the main platform, her presence unguarded. The chamber fell silent when he entered. Delegates from over 200 species turned to face the man who had made history not with war or technology, but with biology. Queen Selari stepped forward. This child was not created for diplomacy. She began. It was not created for politics. It was born from something that began outside of protocols and species lines. Something living, something genuine. She looked to Elias. The galaxy must decide what it wants to be. Fragmented by fear? Or connected by the reality of our shared future? Elias took the cue, stepping beside her. He looked at them all, militarists, scientists, skeptics, and opportunists. I didn't plan for this, he said, but I won't run from it either. Whatever comes next, this kid, our kid, deserves more than fear. It deserves hope. The chamber remained silent. Then, surprisingly, the representative of the Aquatic Vrel Confederacy, whose species once believed humans were too primitive to be allies, rose to speak. If this is what humans are capable of, the Vrel ambassador said, perhaps it is time we stop underestimating them. Others followed slowly, cautiously. Some expressed support, some skepticism. But the tide had turned. The hybrid child had become a symbol, not just of scandal or anomaly, but of potential, of evolution, of unity. In the days that followed, laws began to shift. Medical institutions began studying hybrid potential more openly. Cultural alliances were re-examined. And in quiet labs, scientists began asking a question once unthinkable. The birthing sanctum of the Relari capital was a place of unmatched serenity, an architectural marvel floating above the shimmering oceans of Rileth. Suspended between clouds and sea, it was where royal bloodlines had been born for millennia. Each birth witnessed only by the most trusted medics and spiritual guides. But never in its long history had it held an event so unprecedented. Queen Selari, sovereign of the Relari Empire, lay within a chamber of bioluminescent crystal, surrounded by silence and hushed awe. Outside, countless diplomats, scholars, and delegates waited not for war, not for a treaty, but for the birth of a child, a hybrid, the first of its kind. The product of something the galaxy had long declared impossible, a union between a Relari queen and a human male. Elias Drake stood nearby, his hands clenched, his body tense. He had faced orbital bombardments, alien warlords, and assassination attempts, but nothing had prepared him for this. For watching Selari, strong and composed as ever, bring new life into the galaxy. And then it happened. The chamber lights dimmed, the biocrystals pulsed in sync with a tiny heartbeat, and a single cry cut through the quiet. The medic stepped back. The child was born, small, quiet at first, swaddled in a gentle energy cocoon. His skin was pale with a faint silvery Hurrilari elegance with human softness. His eyes opened, glowing faint violet, and his tiny hand grasped the air instinctively. The queen reached out first, lifting the child into her arms. Elias stepped forward, uncertain. He struggled for words. He's perfect. He is ours, Solari said simply. They named him Kale Elias, a fusion of both their heritages. In Rilari, Kale meant Bridge of Stars, a name that would become more literal than anyone could have imagined. The news of his birth spread like wildfire. Across the galaxy, reactions erupted again. But this time, the tone had shifted. There were still skeptics, of course. Old guard. Xenobiologists declared the birth a freak anomaly. Religious purists called for exile. A few planetary governments issued precautionary travel bans on interspecies unions, but they were drowned out by the wave of fascination and wonder. Kale became a symbol. His existence forced the galaxy to reconsider what was possible, not just genetically, but politically and philosophically. If Rilari and human biology could merge, what else could unite? Could cultural divides, ancient rivalries, even centuries-old fears be healed by the very act of creation? On Earth, millions celebrated. Schools studied Kale's genome as an example of adaptive hybridization. Artists painted murals of him cradled in the arms of both a queen and a soldier. For the first time, humans weren't just seen as upstarts or anomalies. They were a part of something larger. The child's early development defied all expectations. By 6 months, Kale could lift objects twice his weight using a blend of Rilari, kinetic control, and human muscle density. By 1 year, he was forming full sentences in both Terran Standard and Rilari High Speech. His mind operated with a fusion of logic and emotion, reason and instinct, two worlds working together inside one child. But more than his gifts, what stood out was his temperament. He was curious, compassionate, fearless. He didn't flinch at alien forms or odd languages. He reached toward them, spoke to them, connected dot, and wherever he went, tensions seemed to ease. Delegates listened more. Soldiers lowered their weapons. His very presence altered the atmosphere of diplomacy. Some began to call him the heir of unity. Still, Solari and Elias knew the dangers ahead. Kale would grow in the shadow of expectations, targeted by those who saw him as a threat. But they also knew something greater, that Kale was living proof of what love, courage, and the willingness to cross divides could create. Years later, when Kale stood before the newly formed coalition of linked species, a council that included both Rilari and humans as founding members, he recalled the story of his birth in a quiet speech broadcast to billions. I was not born for a throne. I was not bred for war. I exist because two people who should not have loved each other chose to anyway. And in doing so, they gave the galaxy something it had never seen before, a future built not on fear, but on faith in one another. The chamber fell silent, and then, to the astonishment of even the most jaded delegates, every species rose to their feet. That day, the galaxy didn't just accept the hybrid child. It embraced him, and it all began with 5 shocking words from a queen, who had dared to speak the truth. The human got me pregnant.